welcome to the third episode of Coffee Pe chaHRcha, a platform to deliberate and discuss the key HR challenges facing the high growth organization. And today I'm privileged to have Amit Bagaria as my guest, who is the founder of the social commerce venture startup called Simsim, and which is an influencer-led e-commerce platform. And in a very short span, apart from amassing over 1 million users and a lot of influencers, the venture has attracted significant attention from investors who have invested over 16 million in less than a year. So that talks highly about the venture. Before Simsim, Amit has had entrepreneurial experiences with Paytm, where he was the key person behind setting up the billion-dollar Paytm mall. And before that, he was with Flipkart, where he was leading the categories. Amit, thanks for giving us your time. How are you doing?
Thanks, Nisheeth, for calling me for this chat. I'm doing this for the first time, so I don't know whether this will be worth your time or not, but doing good. Like everybody, spending most of the time at home, working as well as spending time with family. So yeah, making most of the lockdown.
Yeah, great. So Amit, let's just jump right into the conversation. And I know one of the things that I've been really wanting to ask you is that, one of the most critical phases that any startup goes through, and especially after some decent rounds of funding, is the challenge of building team, right? I mean, obviously you have to build your strategies to acquire customers. You have to, have your ways to set up processes. But when it comes to hiring people and building teams, there's a lot of challenge that well-funded startups face. And given that you are in that phase as we speak right now, because your last fund round got closed in February, what are some of the challenges that you have faced, and what is some of the advice that you would have for other folks who are facing similar challenges, and what are the sort of do's and don'ts, if you can share that with us?
Sure, Nisheeth. By the way, just to put things in context, I don't know if I can call ourselves a super high growth or super high funded company yet. We're just starting off pretty small as of yet. But yes, growing fast for the last 10, 12 months. And to the question that you asked, right, how do we look at hiring and what are the major challenges we face there? Interestingly, if I would have given an answer to this on my hiring thought process 18 months back before I started Simsim, it would have been a little different to what I would tell you today. Because as founders, when you think of building a company, I think all of us think of building the ideal team, right? Super high performance, super smart folks, self-driven, highly motivated, right? So all of us dream of building a team where every individual is sort of matching up to each of those attributes. But I think as startup founders, one of the key things that we need to do is live in the present. Time is of big value to a startup, right? And while as we look to build teams, we want to have the right set of people. Always trying to find the ideal candidate perhaps is not the right answer. I mean, that sometimes we move away from ideal to best fit, and there is like a very small difference between the two. But that sort of helps us balance out speed and also requirements of the org together, right? But there is one big, I would say, exception to this entire thought process, and that exception is when we look to hire somebody. I think skills in terms of ability, in terms of knowing processes, these are coachable skills, right? These are things that you can coach people with once they are part of the organization. But attitude is not a coachable skill. So attitude for us almost becomes a filtering criteria when we hire. We make sure that if we don't find the right set of attitudes in a potential candidate or a potential employee, which is believing in the mission of Simsim, being self-driven, highly motivated, and having the right attitude to deal with ambiguity. If we don't see these 4 or 5 set of qualities, that becomes a filtering criteria for us. But otherwise, just in terms of skill sets and in terms of knowing the right processes and the right experience, well, I think, sometimes you take certain calls and say, okay, the attitude is there, we'll be able to coach this particular guy, right? So that's been a big learning. That's been a big shift in my own thought process after we started Simsim.
Yeah.
Um, Apart from that, I think obviously staying in the present and building up a team fast also means that uh, we at least have spent a lot of time on hiring, right? So uh, our initial days we would have spent upwards of 50-60% of our time just on hiring. And I think there's another learning that we had from those days is that keeping the top of the funnel of resources coming in that you can evaluate and interview uh, very large is super important, because if you're putting certain filtering criterias, sometimes the funnel gets shorter and shorter as you finally get someone in, right? So keeping the right set of top of the funnel requirement in place, using the right tools, working with the right set of partners becomes super important as well. And I can't stress enough on the importance of spending enough time on hiring. I think
Yeah.
no founder can take hiring lightly. I think that's one of the key, most important bits that people need to do in the early initial days.
Yeah, and one of the things, Amit, is at times there are certain candidates whom you come across, and you know, it's just that it's almost like a love at first sight that you really want to hire that guy and all that. But there is a bit of an inhibition at the candidate's end, right? Where he's not sure, you are too new, and this whole thing of employer branding and your attractiveness as a venture comes into play. So how do you handle such situations wherein how do you fire the candidates and make them interested in joining you, right? Because you don't have a history of 50 years. All you have is 8 9 months and some sort of a traction. And a lot of people are looking at, okay, what is what is the glamour in joining this organization? What is the stability I will get in joining the organization? So how do you really fire the candidates up whom you really want to join you?
I think the philosophy there is fairly simple, Nisheeth, right? So in the early days and even now, right, for our key hires and for people that we really want to have in the system, our pitch to them, we take it as seriously as our pitch to investors, right? I mean, if we pitch in a particular manner to an investor wherein we want them to believe in the mission and invest in the company, similarly, an employee is also investing their own time, life, career in the company that you're building, and hence there needs to be same amount of seriousness that you need to provide to that pitch as you provide to an investor. So that's a very simple philosophy that we keep. And apart from that, I think just talking about why we are building the company, how we are building the company, what are the tenets of the org culture that we envisage as we build the company, what is the role that the employee is going to play as a company is getting built, and sometimes also the upside that the employee is going to see as the company grows, right? I think these three, four things broadly sort of communicating very clearly. And I think in short, trying to get the candidate to buy into the dream that you yourself are building with the company, right? That's in short what we try to do. Um, I think what's also very important is because you are looking to hire certain people who come in and almost you're expecting them to give in everything that they have to build towards the success of the company. It's important that from day one, the employee starts believing that the company's success is their success, right? So, so that's one thing that we really sort of push during our interactions with, so to say, rockstar resources or candidates. And I think that in general sort of also helps in motivating them.
And how do you, Amit, what's your secret trick of evaluating for attitude when you are evaluating candidates for attitude? Because while it's easy to say that right attitude is what matters, but if you're sitting face to face with a candidate, what are some of your ways to evaluate if this guy has the right attitude to work with you guys?
That's a very difficult question to answer objectively, but I think what we've done is so right from the beginning, I think, and even now as we've scaled up, typically at junior levels as well, at least two out of the three of us, me, Kunal, and Saurabh,
Okay.
we meet a person before we hire them. And at senior levels, all three of us meet the candidate. And then we have a very systematic process wherein after the first round, whoever is doing the first round, the second person is given a complete feedback on what risks, what positives, what negatives did the first person see in the interview that they did with the candidate. And if there is particular sets that the first guy was not very comfortable with, let's say in terms of, I'm not sure if this guy will spend an extra hours, I'm not sure if this guy will go the extra yard, I'm not sure about his ego, that we have too large a ego. There are like these very simple objective questions that you have in mind, in terms of when you are talking to a candidate. These are passed on to the next interviewer, and the next interviewer then tries to capture these bits in their interaction, right? Also, I think what we try to do is at least one of the three of us or two of us, whoever is interviewing, we do try to push the candidate into slightly uncomfortable spaces in the interactions, um, to see reactions and to see how the candidate is general things about in uncomfortable spaces. Um, but that's not as if we're doing a stress interview or something of that sort. It's more like uh, just asking simple questions like, are you willing to work 7 days a week for a month if the situation so needs to be, right? It's very interesting that people respond to this question very differently, and you get very, very important cues from this very simple response.
Sure.
So yeah, that's how we do this. I don't know.
Yeah, interesting. And I'm sure some of these things are very useful, will be very useful for the UniHyr community when we publish this interaction. uh, uh, what's your sense on the current times, Amit? I mean, it's one of the most asked questions during any sort of interaction is, how do you see the future of work? And I would love to have your views on that. How do you see this whole uh, COVID thing? Is it going to stick around? Not the virus per se, but just the working style that we have adopted during these times. Is it going to go away? Are we going to go back to the pre-COVID times of working, or do we see some significant changes happening?
No, I think there'll be a significant shift in the way people operate and work, because I was myself not a big believer of work from home or remote location working before this entire episode of COVID happened. That's primarily because I had never in my career worked remotely or managed remote teams, right, in a large way.
Yeah,
But I think post lockdown, what we have realized is we had to put together processes to work together as a team, working from our homes. Um, Two, three things happen. I think one, because of COVID, one big positive that I see is that there is far larger cohesiveness in the team, right? So we were a team of 87 people. They were, as it is, a very cohesive team because it was a small team, right? But that cohesiveness has gone to a very different level today because everybody's almost like taking care of each other in these times, right? So there's far larger cohesiveness. There is far larger respect for each other's time, right? So meetings start on time, they end on time, the follow-ups happen on time, right? So there's far larger respect. And with tools like Zoom and Google Meets and Microsoft Teams, today just working from our individual homes is as it's as similar to working from an office environment, right? So apart from the apprehension that people had that we won't be able to have a constant look on what the employee is doing, um, I think everything else works brilliantly in this environment, and I think that apprehension of not being having to have that oversight of employees regularly is also gone away after we've seen sort of motivation and engagement and cohesiveness that the team has shown in the last couple of months, right? So I believe we have, at least as an organization, now started talking about post lockdown. Do we need to do have all teams in office 100% of time? So maybe we won't do that most probably. And I think all companies will start looking at office spaces differently
yeah,
and start treating workspaces from home similar to office spaces.
yeah.
So
True.
it's going to be a big change, and I think it's going to be a big change in employees' individual lives as well, right? So my wife, for example, she's a batchmate of mine from IIM Lucknow, works at Renew Power as general manager there. Um, she's been saying that if I had the liberty of working from home, even 2 days a week post lockdown opens up, um, then there is far more work life balance for me, and I am more efficient in my work towards the organization as well.
Yeah.
So I think most organizations will have a relook, but we definitely are evaluating how we want to do this post lockdown.
Yeah, true. And the fact that every founder or every business head or the team leads had to set up processes to ensure working from home is working fine. There's a lot more system that we have got into our thing. So for example, in our case, when we were in office, the tech was in a single bay. So it was pretty much standing up and asking the questions and telling and passing information. Now everything is happening either on the various tools or messages. So there is a lot of transparency in terms of communication, and nothing falls through the cracks in terms of communication. And that is a big advantage that we see as we are working from home.
Yeah, there's far larger documentation. KPIs, KRS are getting tracked much more. People are following up on metrics much better. So, because you can't just go across the office and talk to somebody and tell them what is needed. You need to document most things, right? And I think that's much better for every organization. So I think that's one big positive out of COVID that all of us can take. This entire work from home and remote working systems that we put in place.
Yeah, let's hope this gets over soon. Amit, thank you. Thanks a lot. It was a really interesting conversation, and we'll keep in touch. And all the best
Thanks.
for all the growth that you guys are going to see over the next few quarters, years, and your future.
Thanks a lot, Nisheeth, and wishing the best of luck to entire UniHyr team as well. To you, to Manav, and to all your employees. Stay home, stay safe, keep working hard, and we will meet once lockdown opens up.
Sure, definitely. Thank you. Thank you,
Thank you.
Amit. Bye.
Thanks a lot.